Free. Good evening. Welcome to a Friday night session of Cat Space. I'm Kat. This is Buckets and my mentor Horsey. Good evening. How are you?
Hi, Cat and Buckets. It's always Friday here,
It is.
even if it's Thursday.
Absolutely. All right, let's get started. Tonight's topic, again, as I've said, it could be a little controversial, but we're going to give it a try, see what
Mm.
we could come up with. Get you thinking, Cat. So before we start, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button on CatSpace, hit the notification bell. What that does is you receive all content and podcasts coming from the four of us or the three of us. Tell your friends if you like what you see, leave a comment. If there's something you want to talk about, again, leave a comment and we'll give you a shout out. And thank you.
And if the idea is actually good enough, you could be in the running to win an award, and we will be discussing it down the line. We will be discussing your topic live
on air and give you a shout out. Okay, so
you could even be on the show.
Exactly. Thank you so much for the love and support to the new subscribers. Welcome. We hope you enjoy Cat Show. So, Cat Space Cat Show. Let's start. The topic. I'm tongue tied.
It's Cat Space everywhere.
Cat Space everywhere. I'm tongue tied. So tonight's topic is America really the land of the free? And the first question I'm going to throw out there is really America the land of the free?
Yes, the cute clue is in the title. Well, here's the thing, right? America says it's the land of the free, but for a country that says it's the land of the free, it actually has the highest incarceration rate in the world. In fact, there are more people in prison in America than all of Africa, and that's actually true. So, and also I'd like to question, what does freedom actually mean? Is it just something that they say after or before or after a baseball game? Or because America seems to love its freedom, but you know, there's a lot of things that I would consider what freedom is, what other people might think is something different. So maybe
is anybody really free? Really? I mean, I guess in the sense of a free society being a democratic society where you genuinely have the freedom of movement to go about your business as long as you're not incarcerated, of course, like Australia is, and many countries of the world are that aren't under a communist dictatorship, then I guess, yes, the US is one of the lands of the free, but is anybody really? Yes, you're free to do what you like, but in a way you're not. I mean, number one, because you live in a community where there are other people and you're not free to do exactly what you want because it may impinge on the rights of others, and so you have to consider others. And I mean, there is government and there are rules and regulations in there that you've got to abide by as part of any community. So no. Having said that, I mean, US citizens seem to have, still in some states anyway, the right to bear arms and all that sort of stuff, which we don't have.
I think, you know, that's the question that ties into that is, what is freedom when it comes to America, which is, what is freedom is, I know we keep coming back to this banter, which is all this conversation of coronavirus, which is land of the free. Half of America is divided by saying, we don't care for the coronavirus. We refuse to wear masks. We've seen on the news, you know, some states in America burning the masks because they teach their children that this is a hoax. It's not real. It's just a flu. We don't like to wear masks. We refuse to wear masks. And people who are, you know, working, whether it's in retail or whether it's, you know, wherever they are, they're wearing masks to keep themselves safe and keep others safe.
What does that got to do with freedom?
Which is, the freedom is, some Americans believe their freedom is, I don't have to wear a mask. I refuse to wear a mask. I'm not going to wear a mask.
But is that something that's encouraged in America, to say you can think or do anything you want because there will be no consequences for you if you do that? And the answer is no, because the truth is, if you let Americans do basically whatever they wanted, including taking off masks, including putting people in danger, and then said, no, there's going to be no consequences for you because this is the land of the free, the whole country would be in chaos. So
Yes, I agree.
I don't, whenever I kind of get annoyed every time someone says America, the land of the free, or leader of the free world, because I don't believe America is leader of the free world. America does not control Australia. They'll make, you know,
Work alongside.
yeah, they'll work alongside, and they'll have foreign policy and all those sorts of things, but they don't own Australia, and they don't own any sort of freedom that Australia has, nor do they own any sort of freedom that any other country has. So I can't really call them the leader of the free world.
This is how I
Well,
see
complete freedom is anarchy, really, as I
how
alluded
I
to
s-
before.
yeah.
And I mean, ownership of freedom is an oxymoron. If there is freedom, there is no ownership of that. There can't be.
Well, the question is America actually, were the founding fathers in America aiming for a democracy, or were they aiming for a republic? Because if you look at their um what what they swear an allegiance to, we swear an allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to one God and a republic
For which it stands,
for
one
which it
nation
stands.
under God,
They don't say anything about
indivisible,
democracy, but they
liberty
do
and
talk,
justice for all.
they
Yeah.
do talk about a republic, and the reason for that is because they were actually afraid of a democracy, because they were worried about group violence or gang violence, to basically solve its problems. They wanted to escape that. So the question is really, how free is it, and is it really free, or is that just kind of something that they've just made up because freedom sounds like such a nice word?
Okay, so here's how I see it.
Well, it does, but it's relative. As I said before, it's complete freedom would be anarchy, and you can't. No society can go for long if that was the case. So when we talk about freedom, we're really only talking about relative freedom, and it's relative to those countries that aren't free because they're dictatorships or communist countries, or and the citizens are really, may not even have freedom of movement. So that's it. When we talk about freedom, it has to be relative, really. And there's
Actually,
a point we get to and we say, right, yeah, well, that's freedom, but it's not really complete freedom, and it never can be in this life. It's just enough enough comfort and freedom to say, well, okay, we are a free country. But yeah, you can't have complete freedom ever.
This is what I think, and I'm not trying to interrupt, but this is what I think. In America, you have people who are on the far left wing, and you have people on the far right wing. Founding fathers wanted America to be a democracy, and then you had
no, that's not true.
then you had the GOP, which is a grand old party, who believe that because they're the far right wing people, they decide that America is a republic. Therefore, it's their freedom of speech to say what they want, when they want, how much of it, why, whenever they want. It's their freedom to, and their liberty to, we're the home of the brave, we're the land of the free. This is the United States of America. We're bigger, we're better, we're brasher. We can do whatever we want in this country. We can live our life the way we want it. We don't care to follow rules. We don't care to, for consequences. This is just.
But the thing is that one of the things the founding fathers, I can guarantee, founding fathers wanted to not have was a democracy, because they knew if they were to follow the plan of the Greek understanding of what a democracy was, like I said before, basically it would basically turn into gang violence, and it would be gang violence that would tear the entire country apart. That is why they were more for a republic than they were for a democracy. For that very reason, that they knew, they knew that I'm sure that they have in America, they have like a watered down version of a democracy, just like pretty much every nation does now that has a democracy, like Australia, which is a socialist democracy. But they were more eager to protect a republic than a democracy, because they were worried of that of civil wars breaking out. And that's actually why they came out with the amendment to allow people to hold guns, just in case the government turned into a tyrannical government, because they were really, really worried about that. But that's another story.
Next question.
Well, the founding fathers were Christians, weren't they?
Oh,
Yes,
And they
were.
wanted to follow, which is why America is still described as a nation under God. Interestingly enough, Australia doesn't go down that path anymore, but the Americans still do talk about it. So, yeah, the founding fathers certainly weren't really interested in democracy as such. They were interested in bringing their beliefs and their views and creating a new society based on those.
That's correct.
Good as some of those values might have been, I think you're right. They weren't interested in democracy in the sense in which we understand it today.
Exactly. Next question. Should schools have extra security due to kids having to wear bulletproof vests to stay safe?
Wasn't there a school shooting in the US the other day?
Please? Could you please read that question again, please?
Okay. Should schools have extra security when it due to kids wearing bulletproof vests to stay safe? In other words, should schools have extra security due to the fact that kids live in fear going to school, not knowing whether they're going to come home or not?
Well, again, that's another reason why America isn't free, because you have to, in order to keep these children safe, and I know it does happen in every single school in America, they have to have security to ensure that the children are safe. But when you've got security and you have to basically put bulletproof backpacks in order so they don't get shot in the back or something like that. That is basically a freedom that's basically taken away, because my idea of freedom, isn't just something that's written on a piece of paper. My idea is freedom is basically freedom of fear. So it, like, I went to an Australian school just as well as most of us did. I mean, I know Kat went to different other schools in different countries, but when I went to school in Holy Cross, I didn't really have the fear that I was going to be gunned in the back at any period of time.
Nor did I.
So I didn't actually. So for me, I like that was, but to me, I suppose I had the freedom to know that I could basically walk down the street safely. But if that's what's happening in America, to the point where you have to dress your kids in a bulletproof vest for the fear that's going to happen, that's not freedom. That is literally the opposite of freedom. And the fact that schools have to spend money to get top security to ensure that they don't bring weapons and stuff like that into the school, that might be a way to address safety, but it certainly isn't a freedom of fear. There's definitely
it certainly builds an environment of fear, and I don't think that's good. In fact, I don't think security at schools is really appropriate at all. Even though there are, in America, certainly there are school shootings and things like that do happen more than they do here, though I think it has happened here on occasion. But I think things should largely be left to find their own balance in life myself. I think some things, imposing things like that, it only breeds the culture of fear.
I think should security be beefed up at schools across America? I think it's quite important because it provides safety for the children and safety for the teachers and safety knowing that they're able to go to school and not having to be scared or frightened. And it's easier to breathe a sigh of relief, and it's easier to move around and know that you are comfortable at school learning and being with your friends, rather than worrying that someone's going to come into school and do something bad. And I think it's important to have security to be able to have the parents have a peace of mind the teachers and the school kids to teach them about safety and not to be scared, and to make sure that this school is completely safeguarded from anyone or anything.
I do get the logic behind why you'd want security, especially during a time where there are lots of shoot ups in schools, and that happens in America all the time. But how many times have you gone to a pub and you've been put off by security because they've pushed you around because they don't want you to act up and whatever? And it just gets to the point where you just no longer feel comfortable in that pub because of security. And that's what I think Causy's talking about, where there may not be any fear from the students anymore, but there might be a fear from the security, and that's where that fear is bred, and it's not a good feeling. It's like the bullies have changed. So instead of bullies that basically work for free, you've got bullies that get paid for a living.
Okay, but it's
just annoying. I think it's just annoying. I mean, I remember going to a pub a few years ago. It was on a Friday night, and I happened to be wearing steel cap boots because I'd been out somewhere, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. I thought I'll go in for a quick brew and then go home. I rocked up at the door, and there were fellows there, security fellows. They asked my ID and that sort of thing, and okay. Then I was just about to walk in. They said, "Oh, what are those boots you're wearing? Those steel caps?" And I said, "Yes," and they wouldn't let me in. So, and I thought that was ridiculous. I said, "Oh, for heaven's sake." And I actually had a go at them. I said, "Look, all I want to do is have a quiet beer before I go home." And I just walked away and went home. I thought, this is ridiculous. It's annoying, actually. And so what we do at schools now, they put those fences up all around the schools in the last 20 years or so, those black fences in Australian schools anyway. And there's generally only one way in, and if you go in there, it's very, very likely that someone's going to ask you what you're doing there if you're not supposed to be there. So without having security guards as such, I think that largely works, because those few people who want to go in there and shoot them up, it's questionable whether even security guards would stop them getting in.
Well, that's right. I mean, like, they're not an army. They might appear to be frightful and appear to scare people off, but it's not like they have automatic weapons on them, because they're legally not allowed to have that. Anyway,
so they're probably powerless.
16 on them or anything like that. So you can't say that if there is a gunman that's going to come in, that security is going to fend them off. The first thing they're probably going to do is call the cops.
It's like those guys they had on the trains and the railway system a few years ago. They had no weapons at all. They were absolutely powerless. And if someone who was strong enough and determined enough to bowl them over wanted to bowl them over, then they'd bowl them over. Wouldn't make any difference whether they're there or not. And that's what I'm saying about the few in our society who are wanting to do those sorts of things. It's questionable whether you can actually stop them, really, whatever measures you take. So for that reason, I don't think there's much point taking extreme measures like security guards, particularly places like schools. I mean, at a pub on a Friday night, when there are lots of people around and there may well be trouble because people are drinking, then maybe. Whether those guys should be at the door or whether they should just be around the establishment is another question. Probably, I think, just around the establishment in case something happens. But we don't want to, as I said, breed a culture of fear, which is what we're kind of getting towards.
Here's my question for you is, are there any similarities between America and Australia?
Look, there are plenty of similarities between America and Australia, but I think that what freedom is for them. I mean, like, okay, so one of the things I was discussing with Kat a couple of days ago is in Australia we have a minimum wage for basically anything, almost everything. And in America, basically they still have diners where people get paid by tips. Now that wouldn't be legal in Australia at all, because you'd be paid by the hour or
it's like
by
commission.
the week. But but buy tips, in my opinion, is basically the very definition of slavery. So I would argue that slave labor still exists, and therefore America can't be free if there's no minimum wage for workers that work in a diner that work off the tips alone.
Well, in some senses, Australia is a much more free country than America because we all have that. We have a minimum wage, and anybody who has a job can generally do well enough,
Yes.
and have a place to live and the things they need. And we also have a health system which is much better than the one in the US, whereby if you get sick and you don't have private health cover, which many people don't have, then if it's absolutely necessary for you to be treated in hospital, you'll be treated in hospital, and the government foots the bill.
That's right.
But in America, you just rack up a bill and you have to pay it off eventually if you have to go to hospital.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing that gets me thinking is that in America, they don't have universal health care. They have Medicaid, but they don't have Medicare, which means, as you've said, we've got more freedom in this country than America because we've got Medicare, and Medicare pays for like dental, optical, hospital stay. You know, like over there, they don't have that facility. They don't have that opportunity like us. And to be honest, it's a worry when, you know, people speak up and say, why don't you get us universal health? And I read somewhere online on Facebook, someone actually wrote, in Australia, they have Medicare and they have help. We don't. And, you know, I think it's quite frightening to think if something happened in America and you need to go to the doctor or you need to go to the hospital, you don't have Medicare. You don't even have universal health.
Well, the thing is, America is meant to be one of the richest countries in the world, and therefore should be able to afford things like Medicare and should be able to provide free medical help for its people, but it chooses not to. And it's also the same thing with their education system. So yes, they do have free education in America, but it's not nearly up to standards compared to Australia. I mean, their free education in America is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. They don't have proper resources. That, you know, a lot of the time, you know, they don't have proper teachers coming in, and it really is a shame, because if you want to build a strong country, the best thing you can do for them is get a proper education system, but they don't have a proper education system. If you want to basically get a good education in America, you have to save up for years and years and years and years and years to be able to afford to take your children to school. And then you might be sent to UCLA and one of those really posh universities if you're lucky to get in.
Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
Yeah, but if you can't afford the education in America, you're just simply not going to get it. And this is
that's right. There's much greater cost, and it's immediate. Whereas if you go to university in Australia, there is a contribution scheme which has gone up and up over the years, but you pay it off as part of your taxation later on, and later on it could take years to pay off. So you still get the education immediately.
I'm amazed that there are so many people in America that are still illiterate. There are people that everyone can speak English, but there are still people in America today that just simply cannot read or write. And that's because they don't have a proper education system. So, I mean, like to make the statement that, hey, we're America and we're the best country in the world, but you can't provide proper education to your own people, is a pretty bold statement to make, kind of thing. That's what I think.
Next question. Is 100% freedom really a good thing?
No.
Oh, no.
No, it is not.
Oh, no.
No, it is not a good thing. We need to take away some freedoms away from people because if there was 100% freedom, it would be complete chaos. I mean, if you look in a case of, say, a murderer. So if I didn't like a person and I didn't like my next door neighbor, and there was 100% freedom without any consequences, I could kill my next door neighbor and get away with it scot-free. And there would be nothing anyone could do about it because there would be no law to stop me. There might be some, I'd probably feel bad about it, depending who the neighbor is.
Someone else might choose to exercise their freedom and come and kill you after you killed your neighbor.
Exactly.
And so there's another example of someone just doing what they wanted to do because they thought that was right. So there might be consequences, but they wouldn't be organized and legal consequences that we currently have. So now,
well, there's the other, there would be, if you had 100% freedom, there would be no courts. There would be no, there'd be no fines, which is good, but there'd be no court system to stop me from doing bad things. And we need to teach the civilizations that if you basically do bad things, there are consequences for your actions. Otherwise, people would just run the world rampant. We wouldn't be able to have a stabilized society. Everyone would be out of work because what's the point of basically working when you can just steal stuff? That you wouldn't need the whole point of laws is to make sure that everyone keeps safe. And that's why our country doesn't revolve around 100% freedom. So we have to
society would collapse.
Exactly. There would be no society, basically.
Okay.
Do you want to read the next question?
Which is the next question?
Which is the
let's see. With America having an extremely large prison population, is it really the land of the free? I think we already kind of answered that before.
Well, they've got a large population anyway, 100 odd million people, 200 million people, is it? What's the proportion of population in prison to the general population, and how does it compare with us?
I know that they have more prisoners in incarceration than us. So I think 1/3 of the country is actually in prison in America. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah. It has the largest incarceration rate. But in saying that, they don't just keep them in prison. They get them to make things like curtains, or they might peel fruit and vegetables. Like, for example, they might do peeled garlic, for example. And even though they might not be allowed to use anything with metal, that they do make things like cupboards and other things which are later sold. So
that's what we used to do some years ago.
We still actually do that. Actually, we still
prisoners used to make things.
We still make our prisoners make things, and we sell that to the community. And we still pay our prisoners as well. Not very well. I think the maximum you can earn in prison per month is about $1,000. And then when you reach that level, you have to give that amount of money to a family or a friend or something like that. You're not allowed to save more than $1,000. But yeah, in prisons, they are basically used as slave labor to provide goods in almost every industry. It's amazing. So that's why I can't agree that America is the leader of the free world, because it still actively administers slave labor all the time in the worst way possible. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Next question. If America has lots of guns and people living in fear, is America truly a free country if they are constantly afraid? Or constantly living in fear?
Well, that's right. I mean, if America has all these guns everywhere, I honestly would be afraid every single night. walking down the street where people have guns.
Yeah, the gun culture in America in some states is fairly entrenched. And I don't think that some people who carry guns carry them for the purpose of actually ever really using them. They just have always had them. And they like to go out on the range and shoot targets and that sort of thing. And that's just kind of a sport. Yeah, it's just what they've always done and what their father did. And so they just still carry it on. There are some certainly who have lots of guns and they like to use them and they really would love one day to shoot somebody with them. But a lot of Americans it's just the culture that they've grown up in, and that's what it is. And they've got them hanging in a cupboard, and they get them out every now and again to shoot targets, as I said.
Exactly. Ever since we've seen the attack on the Capitol Hill on January the 6th, we've seen the amount of people, as I said, carrying guns. It's easy to buy a gun there than to go shopping. I mean, you could go to a store.
You can go to a Walmart and buy ammunition very, very easily.
And they don't.
I'd argue, though, that those who really want to get hold of a gun to do something bad, regulation's not going to stop them. It's like the gun buyback that John Howard had after the Martin Bryant thing. Which was roughly 20 years ago this week, isn't it? That, in Tasmania. The guns that were handed in were guns that people had who were fairly law-abiding, most of them, and they really would never have got it out anyway. They just handed it in because they happened to have it. Right, okay, we better get rid of this. But it didn't really, I think it was ineffective because it didn't really stop those who wanted guns for the wrong purposes. And no, there hasn't been a gun massacre in the time since then. And the claim was made this week that it was because of John Howard bringing in the gun laws and the gun buyback. I don't think so. Because as I said, I don't think it's going to stop those who really want to do bad things from getting guns. In fact, I don't think any of the crims really handed their guns in at that point.
Well, they could really argue the point with that the buyback that they actually had could have been used just to buy more ammunition or buy more guns. So I remember at the days where you could actually get, if you had a gun and you handed it in, they would basically give you money for said gun. And other people would just go, right, oh, well, this is a really, really old gun that I'm never going to use. I'll just get money from the cops to buy a better gun. So I didn't see how that would really ever work, honestly. And people on farms and stuff like that, they might just use a shotgun to shoot kangaroos and stuff like that that are considered a pest or whatever, and that's fairly reasonable, I suppose. Just kill just kill Skippy, I suppose. That's not.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
Tell that to Skippy. But but that's the law. You are allowed to kill pests on your property. That's fine. But I don't like the idea of them just handing in one gun to basically buy better guns. And I think that the reason what John Howard did, as much as I didn't like John Howard at the time, it was probably one of the best things he ever did for our country, to be perfectly honest.
Now,
the regulations, you can't actually buy a gun unless you've got a license, I don't think. A lot tougher in Australia than they are in some states in the US.
That's true.
I don't mind that. But that type of regulation has even been carried down to knives and other forms of weaponry. And again, I really think it's ineffective because it's not going to stop those who really have bad intentions from getting these weapons or using them. They don't care.
Second to last question. With the rise of Black Lives Matter groups and White Lives Matter groups and homegrown terrorism, is America doomed to become less free?
Yes. Because basically in America you have suspected terrorism just like you have in Australia. And so as soon as you have any sort of suspected terrorism law put in place, you are undoubtedly taking away someone's freedom. You are taking their freedom away from to getting an attorney. You're taking away their freedom to have a fair trial. You're basically just putting them into a cell until you can basically find proof that they are or aren't a terrorist. So yes.
And as we discussed last week, there are lots of groups like that in the US, more so than here in Australia. You don't really, I mean, they probably exist in a smaller way, but you don't really find them having a great influence. I mean, look at the Ku Klux Klan in America, which has existed for decades. And as we discussed last week, it does divide society. When you've got groups like that with a fair bit of power and influence in certain areas anyway, it is very divisive, and it's not conducive to freedom at all.
But like in saying that, I mean, like the minute those people, like say members from the Ku Klux Klan, which is basically a hate group against black people or against Jews or against people that don't look like them. The minute you have a hate group that wants to go and hate another group or another people, I should say, to give those people 100% freedom is a really dangerous thing. So that's why there needs to be laws in place to stop the people doing whatever they want and hurting such people, because we can't have lynches in forests and stuff like that, and then have a good night barbecue. We can't have that kind of thing going on. So nor can we have people putting petrol on a crucifix and stuff like that, because that would just scare people. So we can't just have things like that, because that is basically an act of terror. That is basically the same as homegrown terrorism. Just as we can't have people from Black Lives Matter burn down a Kmart or a Target just because they're angry at the fact that they've been oppressed for hundreds and thousands of years.
Perhaps we should have a discussion one night on terrorism, what it is exactly and why it's been in the last probably 25 years has become a word that's used quite a bit.
Last question. If suspected terrorism is a real law, isn't that the defamation of anti-freedom?
Definition? Yes. So as we said before, that is the absolute definition of freedom, like I said, because you're effectively taking away someone's rights to an attorney. You're taking away their rights of evidence. It's like, locking up someone, not having any sort of evidence whatsoever, but just for the fear of things, just for the fear that they might actually do something, or trying to find evidence to convict them properly. Because you got to remember, if someone is suspected of terrorism, they will rot in a cell for at least 4 years until they can find evidence against them. Then they'll stay in there for life. So even before they've been put into a trial, even before they've been sent to any sort of court, they're going to be rotting in prison for 4 years until they can find some sort of evidence to put them in there longer.
Can I just interject by saying, homegrown terrorism, we still hear about it every day, whether it's in this country or whether it's in the United States. And we're talking about the United States, like homegrown terrorism. We had, people, me going back to the Capitol Hill January 6th riots, is that, they're now arresting people from those riots. They started arresting them a couple of months ago. And, for that to happen, and just recently there was another sort of attack on Capitol Hill, and a police officer was killed. And they found like equipment in the guy's car. They found, I think, weapons, and he was armed and whatnot. And you'd think homegrown terrorism is a thing of the past, but it's not, because in a strange but peculiar way, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky to live here, because we don't have that sort of fear in Australia where, we did for a while,
No,
but
not generally, not generally, but a lot of the
Not
fear
generally.
about terrorism was spawned by the September 11, 2001 thing in America, and that many other countries hung onto the coattails of that with a new realization of what terrorism was and how it might affect them if it did happen close to them. And in most areas it didn't. I mean, whatever the motivation behind September 11 was, and however that happened, I don't know. But yeah, it's certainly, certainly there are people out there who do want to perform acts of terrorism, but very, very few. And as with those who want to bust into schools and shoot them up, whether you really stop them doing that, anybody's guess. I don't know.
Last word.
Sometimes not.
Last word.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my last thought is basically, America can sell the image of being the leaders of the free world, or a leader of a free world, but the truth is they're not, because they quite simply, in order to run their own country, or even run other countries for that matter, they have to take away the freedom of its citizens and other citizens, and that's a reality in order to keep their own country safe. So
freedom is relative, as I said.
So I can't call America the leader of the free world when half its population is in, or a third of their population is in prison. So no, I can't call it the leader of the free world.
That's incredible.
It is absolutely incredible, but it's 100% true.
Your thoughts, Swazzy? Last thoughts?
Yeah, as I said, freedom is relative, and I mean, to say we're in a free country still means we are not entirely free, but we're free enough to be able to enjoy our existence and do a lot of the things we like to do and go a lot of the places we like to go. We can never have everything we want. We can never go everywhere we want. I mean, there's always a cost. And freedom itself actually has a cost. Think of those countries in the world who have fought and fought and fought for their own freedom. Often they've done it at the expense of other countries whom they've taken over in the process.
That's right. And
so, yeah.
Is it really free when you take away other freedoms for your own freedom?
And the fact that we have to live in a society of rules and laws.
That's right.
It's relative, and there's got to be rules and laws. There's got to be otherwise, as we said before, society would simply collapse because it would be anarchy, and that
I'm just thinking
doesn't last long.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was really, really fun. It was a great topic, and we hope you guys enjoyed Cat Space. We look forward to having you with us next Thursday for another show. Right. Another episode.
Where it's always Friday.
Where it's always Friday. Good night. Sweet dreams.
Bye.
Bye.